a strong application. Again, the Institute will be held in June of 2016. So again, my name is Angela Bowman, and I am the Program Director for the Hartford Change Agents Initiative. I've been in the position for 4 months, and I've had a thrilling time joining the initiative and meeting all the change agents in the community. Prior to joining GSA, I worked on the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Aligning Forces for Quality project at George Washington University. I'm pleased today to introduce two of my colleagues, Brian Lindberg and Lori Lindberg, who will walk you through the bulk of today's webinar. Brian Lindberg is the Public Policy Advisor to the Gerontological Society of America, the Hartford Change Agents Initiative, and numerous other national organizations. Mr. Lindberg is the Executive Director of the Consumer Coalition for Quality Healthcare located in Washington, D.C. He was appointed by Vice President Al Gore to serve on the Planning Committee for the National Quality Forum. He spent 10 years as professional staff on House and Senate aging committees. Lori Lindberg is the manager of the Hartford Change Agents Initiative. As part of her job responsibilities, Lori assists in planning the Policy Institute. She helps to identify policy-related opportunities and facilitate change agents to be involved in those activities. She also works closely with the Dementia Care Network, one of the Hartford Change Agents' primary projects. In today's webinar, I will provide a brief overview of the Hartford Change Agents Initiative, and Brian will describe the Policy Institute. Then we will delve into substantive content related to the development of your policy project, the criteria used for reviewing the application, and tips for writing a strong application. We will conclude today's presentation with time for question and answers. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with many of the events that the Hartford Change Agents Initiative has sponsored and will seize the opportunity to get involved. We've had a great deal of success over the first 2 years of the initiative, with over 350 change agents enhancing their skills through institutes, conferences, and webinars, much like the Policy Institute. Over the first 2 years, we funded 3 cycles of the Action Awards, and those 25 funded projects encompass 5,000 end users, and we expect another 8,000 to be impacted by the end of July 2016. We've also seen the outgrowth of 2 practice change networks, one focused on dementia caregiving, the other on patient-centered medical homes, which are working with 12 to 15 experts in each work group to improve care. They work on policy and practice change projects, and you can learn more about the practice change networks on the Change Agents website. We just started year 3 of the initiative in October of this year, and year 3 is providing us fantastic opportunities to add momentum and strengthen the capacity of the change agents community to engage in practice change. One of those tools that you can use to strengthen your capacity to create practice change is through the Policy Institute. And on that note, I'd like to transfer the webinar over to Brian Lindberg, who will walk us through the Hartford Change Agents Policy Institute. Brian?
Thank you. And good afternoon to everybody, and happy holidays. Let's start with the goal of the Institute, which is, I think, pretty straightforward. The goal of the Policy Institute is to provide the change agents with the knowledge and skill enhancements necessary to move their practice change issue toward action. And let me just add that this is not what you'd call a basics course on education and advocacy here in D.C. It starts at a higher level, and it enables participants, we hope, to engage actively in the process and add your knowledge and skills and questions to the dialogue and content that we provide. So here is a rather flattering quote from Casey Shillum, who is a person who participated in the Institute in the past. I'll let you all read it, but I think what we're getting at here is regardless of what your particular policy issue area, your change project is, we will try to provide the tools that you'll need to engage and succeed here in Washington. And at the state level, many of the folks who participate in the last 2 years have had state level and a couple local level change projects. So we're open to that, and we try to have a curriculum and interactions that will enable you to use the tools at all levels. So here are some learning objectives. Obviously, this slide should just give you a flavor for the areas we'll cover at the Institute. It isn't comprehensive, but it does give you a sense for the range of things that we'll try and talk about. For example, understanding the current political and policy environment in Washington or your state level is extremely important, and we'll address that. We'll talk about and have an interactive session where individuals learn how to best frame their issues for policymakers in the executive branch, in the legislative branch, and also how to persuade other colleagues, other stakeholders to latch on to your issue and help you move it forward. We'll cover a range of things, including grassroots and grass tops and coalition building. We'll talk some about political action and how you could use it to support your change back home. Knowing how Congress really works is critical to success here in town. I'm sure it's the same in your state governments. If you don't understand who the key players are in the committees of jurisdiction. So we'll have a session that will address all of that as well. We'll use Hill staff, current and former. We'll have someone from the executive branch, at least one person from the executive branch, to talk about how to influence the regulatory process. We have a special guest, usually from the Congressional Research Service, who helps do the training for members of Congress when they first come to Congress, and is a resource to them and their staff as they strategize trying to move legislation through Congress. We have a speaker each year that will talk about public relations, how to frame your issue, and how to utilize the media. And of course, as I mentioned before, we'll have someone who has firsthand experience at state level interaction and success with policy at that level. And again, I want to emphasize we try to make our sessions very interactive and the kind of experience where you'll learn from each other as well as the speakers. So let me have Lori move us on to the application process.
Thank you, Brian. Hi, this is Lori speaking, and you're seeing the key dates there on the screen. You'll notice the application deadline is January 15th, which is rapidly approaching. If you have any questions or would like personal assistance, please email me, and I'll try to help you out. Send me an email by January 4th. Applicants will be notified and will have to confirm their attendance in March. If you are invited to attend the Institute, you will be required to participate in a pre-Institute webinar on April 28th, which will prepare you for your visit to Washington, D.C., and help you learn strategies for making appointments with key leaders on Capitol Hill and in the administration. In terms of eligibility, applicants must identify their Hartford-funded program or Hartford affiliation on the application form. And the other thing that applicants must do is they must complete their Change Agents online platform profile by May 1. Finally, by attending the Institute, participants commit to sharing their experiences with the broader Change Agents community through discussion posts, reports, updates on the online platform and in other venues where appropriate. You will need to submit your completed application with all materials attached to changeagents365@jaron.org. Your application will not be considered complete if all materials are not received by January 15th, 2016 at 5 o'clock p.m. Now, I just wanted to go over, this slide will show you some of the criteria that the reviewers will be looking at when they review your application. Before you start your application, be sure you can clearly articulate the policy or regulation you are hoping to change. Choose goals that are feasible, actionable, and can have a significant impact. Reviewers will be looking at what stage of practice change you are in, considering if you have taken initial steps in achieving practice change, what stakeholders have been engaged, and these kinds of issues. Brian, would you go ahead and take over and talk about some of the ways that and questions that people need to think about when they are developing their policy change project?
Sure. Thank you. You can see from the slide that the idea is to clearly identify your policy that you want to change. And I think the point I would like to emphasize here is that this is a focus on action and change, and this isn't at the research or training level. Some applicants in the past have really been just at the beginning stages of a research project, and they are far from being ready to come up with an action plan and describe really what they want to change. Nothing wrong with that. That may mean that next year is a better year for the applicant because they'll be ready, they'll have data, or they'll have some proposed solutions that have come out of their research work. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, do you, and I guess I would categorize that as, do you have the appropriate movement towards the change? The next thing is, are you at a stage in the change project where you think that coming to Washington, exploring the executive and legislative branch and how they may be able to move your change forward, are you at the right stage for that? Have you taken the initial steps? Have you developed any relationships? Have you gotten proper feedback from other colleagues who understand your issue area, that you really believe that the research you've done, the actions so far, your ideas, your solutions are ready for prime time, basically? Again, developing a policy change project. A couple things I'd add here to, this notion of so what. The reason we say that is when you're going to a state legislator or someone in the Senate or House here in D.C., you really need to know that this is something that is going to hit home to them, that this is a relevant policy change. Now, sometimes it might not be completely understood, and that's all right, but do you think you'll be able to convince policymakers that this is important, this is something worth engaging with you, working towards change? Provide a sense of how you would work on an interprofessional level toward the goals. Have you thought about partners? As I mentioned, coalition building can be a critical part of this process, and it almost always helps in Washington and at the state level if you're able to say, I have buy-in, I have partners, I have, even if it's a loose-knit coalition of other people that believe in the change project I'm working on and who will weigh in. It sounds may be unfair, but one of the things that Hill staff people, the executive branch, they're going to know. They want to know who's with you, who's going to be against you on this project. Ensure that the application reflects your skills and experiences that will help you succeed. We're looking for some sign of here that you've taken a leadership role on this issue, that you have a sound knowledge of that issue, and that you have the ability to engage stakeholders, and that you're willing to make a little bit more of a long-term commitment on this. I say that as I go to the next slide because the last bullet there is consider the commitment you will need to make beyond the Policy Institute itself. So this isn't a 2.5-day commitment because it would be rare that you could solve your problem while you're here in Washington. It's usually a longer haul. I'm not suggesting that just because it took us 10 years to get the Elder Justice Act passed in Congress that you're signing up for a 10-year commitment, but for many of you, obviously, being in the field and wanting to move toward change and improvement in practice and policies is maybe a lifelong commitment. Knowing that the Institute hopefully will give you, will bolster the foundation you already have to work over the next year or more towards your change goals. The first bullet there is really just a cautionary one. It's the idea to make sure that your university or other employer is comfortable with what you're up to. It just makes good sense. Once in a blue moon, we've had someone who has had to get written approval, for example, from their university, or in one or two cases, the university actually had a Washington lobbying office that represents them here in D.C., and they were interested in knowing what the change agent would be going up to the Hill for. And in one case, they offered to go along, and actually it was a very comfortable fit because here was the I'll just say it was the University of Wisconsin. It wasn't, but it was whatever university it was. They had someone here in D.C. who went up, and it actually bolstered the effectiveness, I think, of our change agent. But I just want to make sure that you consider as you apply, thinking about and chatting with whoever you need to make sure your university is comfortable with you coming to Washington, D.C., and doing some education and advocacy. One instance that was interesting was someone who was a change agent who works with the Department of Veterans Affairs. Well, they had to make sure it was okay with their boss or supervisor that they were actually coming to Washington and presenting ideas around making changes to the VA when they worked in the VA. And it worked out, but I think it's better in this case not to ask for forgiveness later, but to make sure it's acceptable during that time. And then let me just add one other thing, and it was mentioned by Lori before, but we do a pre-institute webinar to assist participants who are going to be at the Institute and setting up their Hill Day meetings, their executive branch visits. If I'm available by phone before the Institute to help people come up with ideas of what other stakeholders they may want to meet with in D.C. And then subsequent to the Institute, we'll do a couple different webinars or other activities that'll be available to you as a past Institute participant. For instance, this year we did a webinar on the White House Conference on Aging issues and outcomes, and that was primarily we put it together for folks who had been past Institute participants, although we opened it up pretty broadly. So there's preliminary things we'll do to try to make you feel very comfortable coming to D.C. and not caught off guard. and then there's some subsequent things we do. We had a webinar one year on how to testify in front of Congress or the state level, and we've provided a couple other tools that you can use as you work through your change project. So let me open it up to questions, and we'll try and give you answers.
The conference has been unmuted.
Someone is asking, is there a way to download copies of the slides? Lori, is that something we could do at after the conference call?
Yeah, I think that I could.
We could put it up on the network.
That's right. We could put it on the online platform, or I could send it to you.
Okay. Any other questions? Let me give you my email. I don't know if it was listed earlier, but my email is brian@consumers.org. brian@consumers.org. And feel free to write me a note if you'd like to set up a time for a call, or if you just want to have a email back and forth on any questions you have. And of course, Lori will have her info up again at the end of the call, and you can feel free to contact her. Has anyone thought of anything they'd like to ask? Well, then I will say farewell and have a great holiday season. And Lori, why don't you wrap this up?
Brian, it looks like there is a question on the chat. Do you see that?
Yes, thank you. So the question addresses, I guess it's kind of like, are you ready for prime time? I joined today to get ideas to apply for next year. Have you add others who slowly develop their ideas? Will there be a 2017? And Lori probably knows better about that than I do, but I believe there will be a 2017. And as I mentioned, my email, the writer of that question, feel free to contact me, and I would be happy to brainstorm with you about what you're thinking in terms of your change project.
Before we conclude the webinar, I would like to discuss briefly a key element of how change agents network.
Lori, why don't you mute the lines now?
Okay.
The conference has been muted.
So, and of course, I'm talking about the online platform. If you're interested in the Policy Institute, you already understand the value of networking, collaborating, and strategic partnering. The online platform is a place for change agents to post discussions, share documents and events, and to collaborate with each other. By finding other change agents with similar or complementary practice change interests. If you need help getting comfortable with the online platform, we have a resource in Paul Smith, who is the Communications Associate for the Hartford Change Agents Initiative. And his email is psmith@jaron.org. So please get in touch with Paul if you have any questions about the online platform. And the reason why we really push the online platform is because change agents are all over the country. They're in all different areas of healthcare and health policy and practice. So we need to use the online platform as a way to contact each other. Were there any last questions before we sign off?
The conference has been unmuted.
Okay, I guess not. So please be in touch with us, and we wish you luck with your application.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian and Lori.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Bye-bye.